Upon its release, Midsommar was labeled as a horror film. That's how it was marketed, and they were likely doing that, one, because the horror market performs very well in theaters, and also the director, Ari Aster, had done one film prior to this, in fact, 11 months prior, called Hereditary, which was a horror film that was a big hit. They were most likely trying to ride the wave of his previous success with his first film and have that translate into financial success for this film. It's unknown to what extent this particular marketing tactic contributed to the success of the film. However, what is known is that the film Midsommar was successful in its theatrical run. It was made for around 10 million and grossed about $44 million dollars. If somebody were to consider Midsommar a horror film, it would more specifically be labeled as folk horror, which is a very small subgenre of horror films. And in the modern age, I think there are less than 5 folk horror films since the year 2000. There are two indie films by director Ben Wheatley. He's a small, modern English director. The first is Kill List, which is an okay movie. If you're familiar with indie films that have kind of awkward pacing and are rough around the edges, it has that same type of feeling to it throughout, with a couple interesting moments, some generally average to occasionally poor dialogue, an awkward reference to Animal House, and a somewhat interesting narrative. It's okay. His other film is A Field in England, which has some interesting moments, but on the whole, I found very dull. Put me to sleep on my first viewing, or first attempted viewing, I guess. It's shot in black and white and primarily outdoors. Makes sense because it's called A Field in England. But it's shot outdoors in the way that a lot of independent films are shot in the woods. You don't need any permits to shoot in the woods, so people just take a crew out there, take actors, maybe they're doing a terrible monster movie or slasher movie, and they mostly just have characters run around outdoors for an hour and a half, and it's incredibly dull. This had a similar feeling to it. It didn't feel like it was designed to be shot outdoors and that they found the exact perfect location that they were looking for. I mean, there's a point where there are several close up shots with just a large hedge bush directly behind the characters, and you hear the sounds of cannon fire and musket shots on the other side of the hedge. And there are multiple characters talking about how they've recently deserted a battle and they are trying to run in the opposite direction of it. It doesn't feel like an artistic choice. It feels like a budgetary limitation because they couldn't show you the battle and they didn't have an actual battlefield. So they just shot really close to a bush and didn't show you any of what was going on. And you're just supposed to go along with it. Um, Again, it had some interesting moments and interesting visuals. I didn't find it very compelling. And I did not have a problem with the Old English dialogue in The Witch. I know a lot of people had problems with it, had trouble understanding what the characters were saying, and as a result, had trouble understanding what was going on in the film. I felt that way about A Field in England. They are using a type of Old English and speaking it in such a way that I just didn't know what was going on a lot of the time or what anybody was trying to say. So having now had that same experience, yeah, if that's what it was like to watch The Witch for you, I can get why that would be unenjoyable. So Ben Wheatley's trying to keep folk horror alive with Kill List and A Field in England, but they're both just okay. I don't think either are particularly good, and neither am I recommending them. If you really like the genre or the idea of it, you can go check them out. A Field in England is free on Amazon Prime. Kill List is not available anywhere except to purchase a physical copy of online, maybe in some libraries, and I'm sure you can find a website to stream it on. The folk horror genre became well known through the film The Wicker Man, which came out in 1973. A lot of people don't know about the 1973 Wicker Man. It is currently available on Netflix. You can watch it for free, which is great because it's a really good movie. Most people know the 2002 remake of The Wicker Man starring Nicolas Cage, which is a movie that is so terrible it is hilarious and enjoyable. But the original Wicker Man is actually very tense and atmospheric and unnerving and very, very well made. So I would recommend checking that out. There is one folk horror film that precedes it, however, from 1971 called The Blood on Satan's Claw. I have not seen The Blood on Satan's Claw yet. It was available for rental and purchase on Amazon. They have since lost their distribution deal with whoever is the rights holder, so you cannot rent or purchase it. I was not able to find a physical copy to purchase the last time I checked. I've never found it in a library, and it is not available on any other streaming platforms. I have managed to acquire it through other means on the internet, however, so if it looks interesting to you, you can find it. It's a bit of a hassle, and be careful. The last example of folk horror is the stop motion music video for the song Burn the Witch by Radiohead. It is mostly a 5-minute recap of the events of The Wicker Man, but done in a more cartoony art style. It's an enjoyable little retelling, but doesn't offer much on its own in terms of narrative or expanding the genre. So, those films are the ones that primarily inspired Midsommar's location, setting, and tone. Having not seen The Blood on Satan's Claw, I can't compare it to Midsommar. However, Midsommar is arguably the best folk horror film of all time. Uh, the original Wicker Man is a contender, and The Blood on Satan's Claw may be a contender, but Kill List, A Field in England, Wakewood, another independent one from 2009, all the other modern efforts to bring the genre back have been mediocre at best until Midsommar, which I think is absolutely outstanding. With all that being said, if one was to call Midsommar a horror film, it would be labeled as folk horror. I think this is a partially accurate term. I think a psychological thriller would be a more accurate term to define Midsommar genre. It is not particularly horrifying, though it does have some emotionally distressing moments. And I do mean emotionally distressing, not just scary. And it does have a couple moments of physical gore or violence, though they're very brief and you don't see these things happen. You see the after effects of them. What you primarily get is a small group of people from America going to a foreign country and participating in a series of rituals that are part of a large festival that happens only once every 90 years. Now, the actual Midsommar Festival happens every year, but there are particular events at the festival that only occur once every 90 years. So, while everybody is participating in these events, they start to notice that something strange is going on. The people there are unlike the people they're familiar with back home. The society functions differently from their own, and some people appear to be going missing. So, the primary thrust of the plot is uncovering the mysteries that are going on at the, I'll call it a compound, where the Midsommar Festival is happening. Hence why I would say it's more of a psychological thriller. Thrillers generally deal with uncovering a mystery and the fear and tension of being caught or discovering something that can put you in danger, whereas if you had left well enough alone, everything would have been fine. The psychological elements come from the emotionally disturbed nature of our main character, her mental health issues, and a variety of hallucinations and supernatural events which could be considered hallucinations that occur throughout the film. Now, one thing that does set Midsommar apart, and also to some extent keeps it from being a true horror film, is its comedy. It has moments that are genuinely hilarious, a lot of them carried by Will Poulter and his delivery. The dialogue is funny, it's designed to be, but I think he was just perfectly cast to play the role he was placed in, to be the comic relief slash the character who we kind of dislike throughout a lot of the film. It's interesting to note writer director Ari Aster started with Hereditary, which is a dead serious, terrifying horror film, then moved on to Midsommar, which is more of a psychological thriller with a surprising amount of comedic elements, and in a recent interview stated that he would like to do a dark comedy film next. He appears to be making a transition into, a completely different genre after using Midsommar as a stepping stone to that next genre. Though it may just be the case that after doing Midsommar, he got a taste for comedy and wants to try it out next, and then may return to horror afterward. Who knows? A fun quote from Ari Aster regarding Midsommar came from his first interview on his press tour for the film, where he said that the film could be described as The Wizard of Oz for perverts. He's since stated that he hates this quote and regrets having described it that way, especially because it was turned into a headline that was plastered all over the internet to describe the film, and that he only said it because he was drunk. So take that how you will. I think it's a great quote. Aside from Will Poulter, there are a couple other notable members of the cast. If you don't recognize Will Poulter by name, you might know him as the teenage son in We're the Millers, the annoying cousin in the Chronicles of Narnia Voyage of the Dawn Treader, some guy in the Maze Runner movies. I didn't see them, but I saw his face in the trailer several times. And he had a small part in The Revenant, where he was the one on the receiving end of Tom Hardy's monologue about his father killing God, who was a squirrel. If you haven't seen The Revenant, it is also fantastic, and you should spend your time seeing it. We also have in the cast William Jackson Harper, who is most known for playing Chidi on The Good Place. Here you'll find him in a similar role. I'm a little worried about him getting typecast, but this role's different enough. He's playing a college student working on his doctorate thesis in the runic alphabet and Swedish and Norwegian culture and things of that nature. I say that he's different enough in this role because he's kind of a douchebag in this by comparison. I mean, when he's Cheaty, he's lovable because he's trying so hard to be good and has so much trouble doing so, but is absolutely earnest all the time. Whereas in this, he's not really concerned with respecting the culture that he's studying or the people who are a part of it. He just wants information to satisfy his own curiosity and to write his paper. So he's a lot more self centered in his pursuit of knowledge in this. He also had a part in the film Dark Waters, starring Mark Ruffalo. I haven't seen that though, so can't really tell you how he was. I just know he played a lawyer, so still kind of playing the smart guy type, but hopefully he branches out soon. And last, and most importantly, is Florence Pugh, who is the lead actress of Midsommar. She does an absolutely incredible job with her performance. Recently, you could have seen her in Little Women, the upcoming and indefinitely delayed Black Widow, where she plays Scarlett Johansson's Natasha Romanoff's sister. Who cares? She was the lead in Fighting with My Family, which is a pretty good comedy slash drama and is available on Hulu at the moment. She also had a moderate role in the Netflix original film Outlaw King. She is starting to get around the scene, and I hope all the best for her because, based on her work in Midsommar, she deserves all the success in the world. Now, one of the things that made me most excited for Midsommar was the first trailer. The first teaser trailer showed off a horror film that took place in the middle of the day in bright, hot, broad summer daylight in a wide open green field with lots of color. If you watch a lot of horror films, you're really used to them being steeped in darkness and heavy shadow and looking closer to something like Blade Runner with Venetian lighting all over the place. And a lot of people over the years have wondered if it was possible to do a successful horror film in the middle of the day, and nobody had been bold enough to try it until now. And it was an absolutely rousing success. I am a little annoyed, however, by that first teaser trailer. The film is in a 235 or 239 aspect ratio, so it's got pretty sizable black bars on the top and the bottom of the screen. They're black because, well, they're always black, but in the first teaser trailer, those bars were white. And I thought they were going to be white in the release of the film, further adding to the overblown, washed out, hazy, too bright to see clearly visual aesthetic that they were going for. And I thought it was a really bold and exciting choice to actually change the color of the aspect ratio bars. I don't know if they were told after the fact that they weren't allowed to do that, if it was a mistake in the teaser trailer, or if it was intentional and Ari Aster just changed his mind shortly before release. Of the three, I would assume it was because they were told they weren't allowed to do that. I feel like there might be technical issues, or that theaters would be concerned about audiences getting confused and thinking that the movie was broken in some way. Regardless, it was a choice that really excited me that was absent from the final film, and that was a little bit disappointing. Also, if you watch the main trailer for the film, you'll see a few different shots from a single scene that took place at night. That scene did not make it into the film, which leads us to the director's cut of the film. A director's cut of Midsommar was released, I want to say, 2 months after Midsommar had been released in theaters. The director's cut was released in theaters for one weekend only, and it was stated that A24 was not going to release the director's cut with the Blu-ray. It would only be available in theaters for those who would like to see it, and that the director's cut was rated NC-17 instead of being rated R. The director's cut has the missing nighttime scene from the main trailer. I did not get to see the director's cut. I had some friends who were very into Midsommar who did see it. They were happy with it, but said that they also understood why the scenes were cut out in the first place, and that the theatrical cut flowed a little better and was justifiably a tighter knit movie. So hopefully one day it gets released on a 4K or a reprint of a Blu-ray or a Criterion edition or something. But for now, it is inaccessible. I'm sure there's a camcorder rip of it online somewhere, but I don't want to watch that crap. I want to watch it for real. Well, with all the preamble out of the way, we can get into the film proper, the theatrical cut that everybody got to see and that is currently available on DVD and Blu-ray. And is free on Amazon Prime, I should mention. If you haven't seen Midsommar, that should have been at the beginning, but it is available for free on Amazon Prime for anybody who would like to see it. The film starts with what I would call a cold open. Technically, that's a term for an episode of television. They have a little scene that plays. It's called the cold open, and the theme song or intro segment plays immediately after it. This film has that in the form of Danny's bipolar sister not responding to her messages and causing Danny a lot of concern. Danny's parents also won't pick up the phone. In this segment, there's a fantastic jump cut where we start on a snowy forest with absolutely beautiful vocals, which are interrupted by the loud ringing of a landline telephone. And each time the landline telephone rings, we cut away from the forest and closer with each ring until we are inside of a small suburban house where we see Danny's parents sound asleep. Danny's talking to her boyfriend. She's concerned because her sister has a history of mental health issues and bipolar disorder, and she's never gone this long without responding to her messages before. We cut to her boyfriend at dinner with the rest of the main cast. They're encouraging him to break up with Danny. He's talking about why he can't. Then he pretty much decides that he's going to. But right then, Danny calls him again and we just hear her wailing on the other side of the telephone in a way that I would describe like the wails of a wounded animal stuck in a trap, or somebody who has entered the stage of the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. It is just absolutely guttural and heart wrenching cries. It's then revealed that the fire department is at Danny's parents' house, and that there were two cars running in the garage with tubes running from the garage through the house underneath Danny's parents' bedroom door, and another one taped around her sister's mouth, she having killed her parents and committed suicide. This leads to the boyfriend being unwilling to break up with Danny because he knows that she is going to need him. And this is kind of the setup for their relationship for the rest of the film. It's she has a lot of problems and is an endearing person, and he is a normal guy who doesn't really know how to deal with her problems or be there for her or provide the support that she needs, and wants to get out of the relationship, but feels guilty because of the mental and emotional problem she has, and feels like he has to stick around. So essentially, he's guilted into staying into the relationship, um, and she's very insecure that he doesn't want to be in the relationship, which he doesn't. So maybe they shouldn't be in a relationship, which is, again, the point of the movie, but that's all set up here in their initial interactions. Now, the end of this cold open leads to the more unique and experimental visuals that Midsommar has over Ari Aster's previous film, Hereditary. Hereditary is absolutely excellent. It's shot beautifully, performed beautifully, great soundtrack, blah, 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 blah. Can't sing its praises enough. However, its visuals are very standard. It doesn't do anything really unique in the cinematography or lighting department. Midsommar does a lot of things that are unique in the cinematography and lighting department, particularly just how bright and colorful everything is. Everybody's wearing white with little purple, red, green, pink accents on different parts of their robes. The interior of the farmhouse with bunk beds that everybody stays in while they're on the compound looks like the Swedish folk cult equivalent of the Sistine Chapel on the inside because of how the walls and ceiling of the building have been painted and decorated with their history and folk tales. There are a handful of shots in this film in particular that stand out to me outside of its general color palette and lighting style. The first one comes at the end of this cold open. Danny is crying in her boyfriend's lap on the couch, and the camera slowly dollies towards them, and the camera slowly pushes out the window behind them into the pitch black night with nothing but heavy, heavy snow as if it is a blizzard outside. It is just pitch black sky filled with flurries of white, and just barely through the blizzard, we can see the opening credits of the title Midsommar and the names of the primary cast. And then it hard cuts, and we're in summer, and Danny and her boyfriend are going to a party. Whatever. The other shot, or shots, is the transition from her boyfriend's apartment to the airplane on their way to Sweden. This is done when Danny becomes upset as their Swedish friend says he's very sorry and passes on his condolences for the passing of her parents. She gets upset and she walks to the bathroom in the apartment, but the camera is looking at her from a top down view at the top of her head, tracking with her, and we watch it pass over the living room and into the bathroom. And then when the camera cuts down to a medium shot on Danny's face, she is now wearing a completely different outfit and walks out of the bathroom and is on the plane. Now, one thing I should clarify. When the camera tracks from the apartment living room into the apartment bathroom is the same as the airplane bathroom. They built the sets in such a way so that they could attach the airplane bathroom part of the airplane set to the living room of the boyfriend's apartment set. Now, this is very similar to the type of visual transitions that we see in the films of Peter Greenaway, who is one of Ari Aster's favorite directors and biggest influences, especially his film The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. There's a specific shot in that where a camera is dollying laterally from left to right, following two characters in a room that is painted red, has red furniture, and they are wearing red outfits. And they walk through a doorway from the red room into a white room where everything is painted white, the furniture is white, the floors are white, and their outfits are white, but it doesn't cut at any point, and it lets you see the edges of the sets as it goes from one room to the next. So this is him doing something very, very similar. Um, the way he describes it when he talks about Peter Greenaway's film is that they have a type of artifice to them that makes them very unsettling. And I think he was going for that same thing here. And I think he succeeded spectacularly. It's just about my favorite shot in the movie. The third shot is when the camera pushes past Danny and her boyfriend and out the window of the airplane. As soon as it crosses the threshold where it goes through the window, the camera starts to violently shake. I think this is, again, just a way to establish, rather than a sense of artifice, a sense of dread, and that it is once they exit the plane that things are going to go crazy or become harrowing or become disorienting, violent, frantic, etc. I think that is the point of the shot. It's just to establish that, hey, we're transitioning from America and the plane into Sweden, and it's as we exit the plane and enter Sweden that things start to get crazy. The last shot is on their way to the compound. They're driving in a car down a long stretch of road, and there's a big, nice banner that welcomes them. And the camera just slowly tilts from looking at the car in the road to turning upside down and looking backwards and upside down at the car, the sign, and the road. And it holds on an upside down shot of the highway and the trees with the sky flipped upside down for like a full minute. It's very disorienting and very beautiful and very abnormal. I think the point of this was, again, just to establish things are different in this place. A lot of the customs, a lot of the behaviors, manners of dress, ways of speaking, ways of behaving, ways of interacting interpersonally, it's all different here. So, to put it simply, things are turned on their head or the world is upside down. It's also a visual technique that just disorients the audience. So it puts us in a similar headspace to the characters. And again, it's one of my four favorite shots in the movie. It's great. I don't know what else to tell you. Immediately after this, we get to one of the best parts of the movie, and it makes the rest of the movie a little less enjoyable because this part happens early on, and I wish there was more stuff like it throughout. And that is everybody takes drugs and starts hallucinating. Everybody gets there. We get another example of the dynamic between Danny and her boyfriend in their relationship, where everybody is offered drugs. I think they're shrooms. I don't know if they specify. Uh, I think they say it's shrooms and that Danny's uncomfortable, so they offer to brew it into a tea for her, so it's more enjoyable. But she doesn't want to do drugs. Everybody else wants to do drugs. She tells her boyfriend, it's okay, I'll do drugs later. You go ahead and do drugs now. And then he's all sad and puppy dog eyed and goes, I don't want to do the drugs without you. So then she goes, okay, well, it's fine. I'm fine. I'll do the drugs. And he's like, no, are you sure you don't have to? And she, yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, okay, it's okay. I'll do the drugs. No, I swear, I'm fine. It's fine. Um, this is the type of behavior where everybody starts accusing the boyfriend of gaslighting Danny throughout the film. I don't think he's gaslighting her. Gaslighting is something that I think has to be done intentionally to be gaslighting. I think an excellent example of it is the first or second season of the show Mad Men. It happens throughout, but Don Draper is talking to his wife Betty. She accuses him of cheating, and then he specifically asks her, "Why do you think that?" And she goes, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell you just so that you can take everything I say and pick it apart and twist it and tell me why I'm crazy." That's gaslighting. This guy's just a bad boyfriend. Um, he's just he's just selfish enough where he doesn't put on a happy face when he says, "No, I'll wait for you. Don't worry about it." He lets his real emotions eke out when he goes, "No, no, I'll wait for you." The problem here is not that he's trying to gaslight her, it's just that he's not convincing enough in his efforts to comfort her and make her feel like her decisions are valid. However, it's also 100% Danny's fault that she does drugs because she could just stick to her guns and not do them. Nobody at any point intentionally pressures her. They just accidentally don't make her feel quite comfortable enough and supported enough in her decision for her to stand by it. So, she could just work on being a stronger person and then she wouldn't have some of these problems. And her boyfriend could also work on not being such a pathetic little douchebag, and then she wouldn't have the problems. But, you know, she doesn't fix herself. She can have these problems with anybody, not just with him. So, I don't know. It feels like everybody's at fault and everything is dysfunctional and nobody is willing to address it. And that is the crux of their relationship throughout the film, which, to some viewers can be very frustrating. I was fine with it and thought it was interesting, but especially after describing it out loud like that, yeah, that can be really repetitive and really just grating throughout the course of a 2 hour and 12-minute movie. I won't say that things necessarily pick up or get more interesting once we reach the compound, but the film feels like it finally starts being the movie that it wanted to be the whole time. What I mean by that is the visuals of the movie are very clearly designed to be in broad, harsh daylight. They spent a lot of time designing the buildings of the compound and obviously building them, choosing the colors for all of the buildings, uh, designing the design and color palette for everybody's wardrobes, painting the equivalent of the folk horror Sistine Chapel inside of the barn that everybody stays in throughout the film. It's all very unique and it's all excellently crafted and it's really, really nice to look at. And you can tell Ari Aster wanted to make that part of the movie really badly. The first 20 minutes of the movie are very good, and I think I might like the first 10 minutes of it the best. But you can tell he did all that just to establish the characters, establish them in their native environment, so that this part of the film paid off that setup and that it was more effective in subverting their cultural expectations and making them and us as an audience uncomfortable by transitioning us into a foreign environment. On their walk into the compound, there is one of the funniest moments in the movie to me where Will Poulter asks if there are ticks, and everybody says, "Yeah, I think there are ticks. In fact, I think they have a huge tick problem here." And then he goes, "No, no way. My grandpa or my uncle died from a tick, or he got Lyme's disease." And if you'd ask him, he doesn't think it's funny. It's not a joke. And from that point on in the rest of the film, he wears his jeans tucked into his socks, pulled up to his knees. And he looks absolutely ridiculous And there's no mention of it in dialogue throughout the rest of the film. It's just that after that bit of conversation, you see him dressing differently to try and prevent himself from getting ticks at any point, no matter how it makes him look. But then we get to a visually stunning moment where they enter the compound. We see the wide open field with the buildings that have diagonal houses or long red barns, but they're blue, and they have roofs that come down at one end, so one end of the building is shorter than the other, but their design is the same. Their proportions are just different. It looks fantastic on camera, but it's very bizarre. I'm sure it being bizarre is the point. It kind of reminds me of the architecture in Dr. Seuss's drawings a little bit, where everything's just really colorful and has odd shapes and feels very. It doesn't feel gooey like Dr. Seuss does to me, but it feels tenuous and surrealist, kind of like Salvador Dali paintings. But what's great is after we get a shot of the compound, we get a reverse shot of them coming out of the forest, and there is this giant wooden frame of a rising sun that's cut out in the center that they are walking through. And that sun, the maypole, the stage on which everybody drinks booze together. Uh, Man, there are, like I've mentioned two, three times already, the Sistine Chapel esque design of the interior of the barn they all stay in. Um, the other giant secluded barn where the boyfriend gets raped at the end of the film. All of the production design and the wardrobe in the movie are absolutely stunning and completely original. Another part of the wardrobe I really like, though, is all of the Americans' manner of dress. The Americans being our primary protagonists, the ensemble that we followed here, Danny, her boyfriend, and his friends. One, I like how Danny dresses throughout as an individual. She's almost always in baggy, oversized t shirts and sweatpants. Um, One that fits with the whole basic white girl culture in America, the way a lot of girls her age will act and dress at home. It's just that Danny does it in an exterior and social environment a lot of the time. And part of that is reflective of her mental health and emotional issues, um, and how she doesn't take great care of herself, and doesn't concern herself with how she presents herself in public. Um, So, yeah, I like how it reflects the culture she comes from as well as her as an individual and her problems. Additionally, her boyfriend and his friends all dress similarly, except the Swedish guy, because he obviously starts dressing in the white robes just like everybody else because he's a native and he's home and he's going to dress the way that he was raised to dress. Um, but everybody else is wearing just hoodies and t shirts and jeans and sneakers and jeans tucked into their socks to prevent ticks and Lyme disease. They all look very slovenly, relaxed, and casual compared to everybody from the compound. Everybody else from the compound looks very uniform, very formal, very harmonious, very beautiful. And then the two British characters, Emma and I forget her boyfriend's name, but the two of them are also dressed a little more casually like the American characters, but they aren't dressed as slovenly. Their clothes fit better. They look neater, nicer, newer, and ironed. So that's interesting to show the similarity between America and England, but the slightly more formal and respectable presentation of the English characters over the American ones. This carries over not just from their wardrobe, but into their behavior throughout the film. For example, Will Poulter urinates all over the ancestral tree in the compound, which is, again, one of the funniest moments in the movie, where he just starts peeing on the tree, and one of the elders of the community starts screaming at him in a language he doesn't understand. And then his friend comes over and explains that he was peeing on the ancestral tree, And Will Poulter just goes, "What? How was I supposed to know? It's just some dead tree, whatever, man." While the elder of the community is screaming and raving like a lunatic and is absolutely heartbroken at the level of disrespect that Will Poulter has just engaged in, because that tree is their afterlife. It is where all of their um, where the souls of all of the dead members of their community go to reside after their mortal flesh has died. Uh, which I guess is kind of a, I don't know, is that a contradiction to the fact that they also have a belief in reincarnation, that everybody who dies as an old person gets reborn as one of the new babies in the community? I don't know. Because they say both of those things. The ancestral tree is where the spirits of the dead go, but then they also later say, or earlier say, that, everybody who dies comes back. So I don't know. I never thought about that before. It might be a little bit of a mistake. I don't know. Not enough information in the movie. Shortly after their arrival, in fact, like 2 to 3 shots after their arrival through the sun sculpture and the entering of the field of the compound, we see the Oracle for one of, I think, only 2 times we see him throughout the film. The Oracle is a physically deformed child who's the product of forced incest. The community reveals that they force people into incestuous sexual relations in order to have uh, incest children who are, quote, special because they are assigned the position of oracles. And the oracles sit around separate from the rest of the community and they finger paint on blank pages of the holy text of the community. And then the community looks at the finger paintings and deciphers them and attributes meaning to them as if they are new parts of their runic alphabet. This is one of a number of things in the community that raises some interesting questions about respecting other cultures. So the American characters are shown to be disrespectful of the Swedish compound throughout the course of the film, peeing on the ancestral tree, wanting to eat before everybody else, and being really impatient to wait until everybody is seated at the table. Um, they disagree with the practice of the elderly people committing group suicide together once they reach age 72. While the film kind of criticizes or mocks the American characters for their more xenophobic worldview, it also presents a community which is absolutely horrifying. And it feels to me that Ari Aster's kind of asking the question of, okay, we'll respect other cultures and communities and this and that and whatever. Well, what if they make their old people jump off of cliffs when they get to a certain age? It's just like, no, you're not allowed to live anymore. You just kill yourself. Oh, and if you break your leg when you fall, don't worry, we'll just smash your skull apart with a giant wooden hammer. We human sacrifice, but we kill 6 of our own and 6 outsiders. We only do it once every 90 years. So it's okay. Don't worry about it. Uh, we don't look down on the deformed incest babies because we think they're special, but we also force people into ancestral intercourse to make the deformed incest babies because we gotta get those blank pages of our holy book filled in. So it's kind of an interesting thing to consider that the film feels like it's condemning the primary characters throughout, but it's also presenting a culture which is, you know, horrifying and disgusting and pretty much unacceptable by modern standards. So I don't know. What are you supposed to do? You respect other cultures, what, up to a point? Um, it's just an interesting question to consider, and I don't have an answer. The biggest element of fear in the film seems to be generated by drug use. It is when they first arrive, like I was saying, where Danny ends up using drugs in a situation where she feels pressured to use drugs and whatever, and everybody starts using them. Will Poulter starts to freak out as he points out that the sky is blue, but it's 9 p.m. That's not right. The sky shouldn't be blue. And he starts to panic and command everybody else to lay down, which they don't do. Danny starts to get a panic attack immediately after this and wanders off from the rest of her group while hallucinating in a foreign environment. Oh, that's right. She wanders off because she looks down and sees the grass growing through and over her own hand, as if she's losing her sense of self or approaching ego death and becoming one with nature around her. As a side note, I personally find the concept of ego death uh, while using hallucinogenics absolutely terrifying. People say it expands their minds, but I don't know, annihilating your brain's ability to understand that it exists as an individual just seems horrific from an outside perspective. And that appears to be what Danny is experiencing or beginning to experience that causes her to panic. She wanders off, enters an outhouse, and lights a match. And for a brief moment in the mirror of the outhouse, at the fringe of the frame, we see her dead sister's face with the gas tube taped around it, standing right behind her. She turns around and the sister is gone. She panics, runs out of the outhouse and into the forest, and all of the trees and everything in the image have become tenuous and liquid, much like an actual Dr. Seuss or Dali painting, where everything is reality appears to be coming undone as if it is melting or being tossed about by the wind in all directions. And Danny is just running off into the woods alone while hallucinating, which is really stupid behavior, but people engage in really stupid behavior while using drugs. There's a latter portion of the movie where her boyfriend is offered drugs repeatedly by a particular woman. He keeps refusing and then ends up using them. Um, but it's at the point where Danny has won the maypole contest and he's seated very far away from her, and the drugs are making him really uncomfortable. And he asks an older man what's going on or what's being said. And the man just claps in his face, and it causes a shockwave in the image that distorts the entire world around the boyfriend. And he just sits in place, shivering in fear, surrounded by hallucinations he doesn't understand in an unfamiliar environment after being pressured into it by a group of people who threw a party he was invited to. So, the movie seems to be making pretty clear commentary on the fear and danger of drugs and hallucinogenics in a situation where you are unfamiliar and don't feel comfortable and don't have a support network there to take care of you in case you start to have a bad trip. Um, then, while, after being pressured into using drugs and not being in his right mind, the boyfriend is led away into a room where he is date raped by a group of, date raped just in the sense that he gets drugged at a party and then taken away to a secluded room, and then a group of women make him have sex with another girl. Uh, and then, after he realizes what's happened, he runs in terror naked through the compound, discovering the remains of his dead friends. And then they blow dust into his face that causes him to pass out. And when he wakes up, he discovers it is a paralyzing agent that allows him to feel things, hear things, and be conscious, but just physically immobilizes him. And it's at this point where, we get to him being trapped in the carcass of a dead bear and being burned alive by his girlfriend. Or, probably ex girlfriend by this time. So the film very much appears to be setting up drugs as something to be avoided or discouraged or not trusted, at the very least, in a scenario where, again, you are at a party or in a place that is not familiar to you and you do not have friends around to look out for you, and things can go wrong if you do them. There are a couple, well, I guess technically only one thing that happens in the film that is sort of a legitimate miracle, which lends credence to the community and its ideas having value and being something that we, the audience or the characters, should consider being a part of. And that is when Danny starts speaking Swedish, which is a language she does not know at all. Um, she's consumed drugs and is in the maypole competition. And when it is down to her and just a few other girls, they're both laughing. And she starts speaking in Swedish and doesn't even realize she's speaking in Swedish while saying that she can't speak Swedish in Swedish. Uh, it's it's just interesting that Ari Aster decided to put in an actual miracle of speaking in tongues as a way to legitimize the compound and their beliefs, um, and to further cement Danny's connection to them and how she may be a natural fit for the community. The others I was going to mention were the appearance of her dead sister when she's on hallucinogenics in the outhouse, and the appearance of her dead parents in the crowd wearing white robes after she has won the maypole competition and is being hailed as the victor. The way I took these was not necessarily miracles or hallucinations, but closer to what is it? Day of the Dead in Mexico, or All Hallows Eve, and what it used to be, which is a day where the boundaries between the world of the living and the dead become thinner, and the dead can pass back over to visit family members and the like. Um, Now, Halloween and Day of the Dead are pretty different, but, they have that general similarity that I'm referring to. So, the dead sister and the dead parents' appearance in the community felt to me like it was calling back to those sorts of beliefs in various festivals, religions, and holidays. That in certain circumstances, the spirits of the ancestors and the family can reappear to an individual who is still living. It also sets up the idea of Danny perceiving the community as being a place she associates with family, because her parents are not just in the crowd, but they are wearing the robes of the community as if they are already integrated into it, which feels like a way to try and bridge the gap between her being an American and her deciding to commit murder and join the compound at the end. There's a moment where the elderly people commit suicide midway through the film. First lady jumps, kills herself, no problem, and then the old man jumps, breaks his leg, and they got to smash his head in. But when he jumps, it cuts to an ultra wide shot of a profile of the mountain's cliff edge, and he's just a tiny little dot on the screen, and he jumps off and falls in like a perfectly straight line, and there's no real sound for impact or music, and it feels funny, like a Wes Anderson film, like in the Grand Budapest Hotel, where it cuts to wide shots or ultra wide shots of the hotel, but you can tell that Ray Fiennes and the other bellboy lead are standing in silhouette profile on a balcony of the hotel in an ultra wide, but they're actually not there. It's actually a tiny little animated clip that is made to look real. This felt exactly like that, and it felt out of place to me the first time around. The second time around, it felt okay, but I just think that second jump off the cliff feels really tonally strange. The other example of this is Bear in a Cage, where everybody's walking through the compound and there's just a giant bear in a big wooden cage, And they go, "Whoa, what's with that bear?" And their Swedish friend goes, "What? It's a bear in a cage." And the cage is like decorated with green vines, and th- there's something about that that also just feels like Wes Anderson to me, in the absolutely disinterested, emotionless, deadpan delivery of the Swedish friend of, "Yeah, it's a bear in a cage, just whatever, it just is what it is." Also notable, you can go on YouTube right now, go to A24's channel, or just search it. They had an advertisement for a bear in a cage action figure that you could buy for a limited time while Midsommar was in theaters. I don't think there are any left, but if you're interested, you can check it out, and I'm sure somebody's reselling one of them on eBay. While they spot the bear in a cage, the camera is laterally tracking with them from right to left and reveals a tapestry which has all of the major events of the film stitched onto it in color. And it starts, since it's moving from right to left, it shows us the last thing that happens in the film with the boyfriend being burned alive as a bear, and tracks backward through his rape, Danny winning the maypole contest, and every other major event back to the beginning, and spoils the entire movie for us in advance. Um, but if you don't know what's coming, you just kind of look at it and you go, what the heck is that? There's a big tapestry with some pictures on it. What was that about? Okay, now it's gone. But I think it's really interesting that, yeah, it just spoiled the whole movie right in the first third of it, maybe the first half of it. Only two things left to say. One is, what are some of the good scares and events of the film? Well, I guess I should also mention briefly about the visuals. There are some absolutely fantastic frames in this movie. Kind of goes without saying. You can just look at the movie and look at the trailer, but top down shots of everybody arranged in concentric rings around the maypole, stunning. Uh, the four unique shots and the bathroom transition I mentioned earlier, the shot of them center framed coming out of the sun, the way everybody is arranged on stage when they all take shots together. Um, the movie very rarely uses close ups or over the shoulders in conversation. It normally frames people in a frame together, moving throughout it, and the camera moves with them. It dollies forward and laterally often, or is very smoothly handheld, tracking with them through the compound, revealing a lot of characters and animals and buildings as it travels to really establish the community and the world of the film and immerse you in it and what it feels like throughout. Instead of just telling you about it, it shows it to you. Um, the crisscross runic long table that like 100 people sit at for the several meals they have. Um, they have some top down shots of that as everybody picks up their silverware, and they're picking up their silverware as the edge of the camera frame introduces each of them. It's wonderfully timed, it's wonderfully shot. There are just so many things about the visuals that are absolutely fantastic throughout. But I just wanted to draw special attention to how it composes some of its images, particularly top down ones. But major events. Emma and her boyfriend are going to leave after the old people kill themselves. Emma's boyfriend disappears. They tell her he left without her, but they'll take her to meet him now. That's the first thing where you're watching the movie and that doesn't make it feel like a horror movie. That makes it feel like that makes it feel like a thriller that's going in an obvious direction, where you hear that and you see the situation and you go, they killed him. Why are you listening to them? Why would you get in a car alone with them now? They killed him. Call him. He's not picking up. Don't leave. Stay with the Americans and find somebody else to leave with you, or just take off in the middle of the night. Don't let anyone know you're leaving. It's one of those things where feels like a character doing a stupid thing in a horror movie, uh, but in such a way where there isn't really any tension or fear about it, because you're like, oh, she's stupid. Now she's going to die, and he's already dead, and whatever. So it's fine. Um, but I felt bad for the two of them, that's for sure. especially because the boyfriend has his eyes plucked out and replaced with flowers, and they do the blood eagle to him, which some of you may be familiar with from the History Channel series Vikings, which is also free on Prime, where Vikings would slice people's backs open while they were alive and tie their hands spread out, similar to if they were nailed to a to similar to if they had been nailed to a cross. Their arms are just forced into a position where they're spread out, and then they pull your lungs out of the back of your chest and lay them over your shoulders and drape them onto your chest. And those are supposed to be the wings of a blood eagle. So they do that to him while stringing him up in a barn, plucking his eyeballs out and replacing them with flower petals. So that's a horrible way to go. Never see what happens to Emma. Chidi starts taking pictures of the holy book without permission. Actually, not just without permission, but after he was expressly forbidden from doing so. They just crack him in the back of the head. But what's great is the noises he makes on the ground afterward. He kind of like twitches and shakes around like he's having a seizure of some sort because he got knocked in the head and it's messing with something in there. And he's making these um, gurgling, shallow breath noises that are really gross and awful. But I appreciate it because if he just got clonked in the head and hit the floor, it would have been like, oh, that was boring. But the horror doesn't come from gore of cracking his skull open or seeing his brains and blood spill out. It's just the horror of him twitching and convulsing and being unable to breathe properly and like swallowing his own tongue and the horror of a seizure out of nowhere for his death. So that's pretty great. Also in that scene um, is something that confused me and several of the people I went to see the film with, where Will had disappeared the day before to go have sex with one of the girls on the compound, and nobody had seen him since. And then he's standing over Chidi after he's been cracked in the back of the head, but he doesn't look quite right. And I couldn't tell who it was or what was going on in that shot of Will. And then somebody explained to me afterward, yeah, they had cut Will's face off, and somebody else was wearing his face after while he killed Chidi. So Will had already died, and one of the members of the community was just wearing his face, which is hilarious because there's so many TV shows and movies where people are trying to scare other people, and the scene isn't actually scary. It's just a character is trying to scare another character. It's often played for comedic effect, where they threaten to cut off and wear their face, and this movie just actually did that, but we just didn't see the person die, get their face cut off, or have somebody else put it on. It just cut to somebody else already wearing it, but it was in such a way that it's uncannily discomforting, but also primarily just confusing. When the boyfriend's running around at the end, we also see Chidi's leg sticking straight up out of a small garden in front of one of the houses, which is, again, it just feels kind of funny. It's so ridiculous and out of place. There's just a leg sticking up out of the ground. It feels like something you'd see at the end of a terrible slasher movie with cannibals, where it's like, oh, the girl, she's getting out of the building and she's running away, and oh no, her friends' arms are sticking out of the garden, and oh, their heads are strung up on the pole with the laundry that's drying outside, and it just, it feels totally out of place and like something pulled from an unaware B movie that would have gone straight to DVD or VHS and Blockbuster. But here, I think it knows it's doing that and it's playing it off for kind of a comedic effect. If it's not, then it failed at being genuinely scary or unnerving in any way. It's just kind of absurd and ridiculous. Oh, that's about it. So, like I said, it's not particularly horrifying. It's just kind of people occasionally disappear, they get hit in the head, their leg sticks out of a garden, They get bloody gold and their eyes are replaced with flowers. That one's pretty bad again. But yeah, not much else is going on. It's more about the visuals, the soundtrack, the world, the wardrobe, the characters, and how they interact, how good the performances are. Um, and then the first time around, it's the mystery of it all. But the second time around, it's really enjoyable just uh, because of that comedic element. Like it's a film that I don't think is quite as precise or as good as Hereditary, but it is a more enjoyable film to watch repeatedly. In Hereditary, once you know what's going on, it's just a miserable movie. Um, but Midsommar has Hereditary is a miserable one. Midsommar has just enough levity to it and enough character dynamics going on at once to feel entertaining, even when the mystery or quote horror of it has all been revealed to you on a previous viewing. Now, lastly, is my primary and only real problem with anything in the movie, which is Danny's justification for giving up her American citizenship, becoming a member of a cult compound, and killing her boyfriend, who's the last person left that she knows. My problem is really simple. Throughout the entire film, Danny keeps warning her boyfriend and all of his friends, hey, something's not right here. I think we should go. I don't want to be here anymore. Can we please leave? And the boyfriend and all of his friends are going, it's just a different culture. We just have to acclimate. Don't worry about it. We'll get used to it. We should just stay. And she's like, I don't want to acclimate. I want to leave. This is crazy. Those old people just killed themselves. Remember how my parents just got murdered and my sister killed herself? Don't really want to be around that right now. So she's also the one who brings up to everybody, hey, isn't it really weird that Emma's boyfriend left and didn't let her know and can't be contacted? And they're just telling everybody that he left and we have no way to confirm it. And they're like, yeah, I guess that's kind of weird. Man, he's a real douchebag. And it's like, that's your response? You just he's a jerk, but you're not at all suspicious. And but she is. So it annoys me that she's the voice of reason throughout the entire film, where she's telling everybody, we can't trust the people in this community. They're sketchy. People are disappearing. I don't trust them and think they might have something to do with it. And even if they don't, they're killing old people, and I'm not cool with that. So, okay, but Danny starts speaking Swedish magically. She wins the Maypole Mayfair competition and becomes the May Queen. She gets to wear a big dress of flowers that is absolutely amazing to look at, but I'm sure was very uncomfortable to wear. Not just because of how hot it was outside, but because of how itchy and pokey and scratchy that thing must have been. Must have been a nightmare to wear. Aside from winning the competition and starting to be friendly with a couple of the girls, that's only about a 15 to 20-minute piece of the movie at the most, very close to the end. And after she does her May Queen duties of planting something and doing a little song and dancing around with torches so that there's a great harvest, they come back to the community, and her boyfriend is in the middle of being date raped, and she hears the women singing who are helping to rape him, and she goes, "What's that? What's over there?" And all the girls who are hanging out with her that she's all friendly with are all like, you shouldn't go over there. It will hurt you." And she goes, I'm going to go over there, which is in line with her, curious and untrusting nature throughout the film. So then she sees, from her perspective, her boyfriend cheating on her with another girl. She doesn't know he's been drugged and led into the room and is being raped because literally one of the leaders said that his zodiac sign aligned with that girl's, and they think that he'd be a good mating candidate. She doesn't know about any of that, but she comes running out of there crying and screaming and vomiting all over the place, and she runs into the barn, and all the girls who had been with her follow her, and they all start crying with her, mimicking her cries and her breaths to visually display their empathy and their sympathy and their connection to her and how they understand her feelings and her pain instead of trying to just talk to her or fix the problem, which is what her boyfriend would have done, which wouldn't have been helpful to her. So, okay, she finds this helpful. But it's just after this happens that the boyfriend gets kidnapped and she gets to choose between killing him and killing a member of the community. And she elects to burn him alive while he is conscious and feeling, but simply physically immobilized. And to then just live with these people. But my problem with that is she didn't trust these people the whole film because she thought they were killing everybody and making them disappear. She gets hard proof that they're killing people and making them disappear. And because of the response of the girls going, "You shouldn't go over there, it will cause you pain," and the other large group of women who are guiding her boyfriend's hips while raping him, uh, all of them in the community are clearly aware of what's happening in that barn and are responsible for it, or at the very least complicit and encouraging in it. But she completely overlooks this and the fact that they are in fact the ones who have caused her this pain. Right? It's not just that he saw a pretty girl in the community and cheated on Danny. It's he saw a pretty girl in the community he was maybe kind of interested in and flirted with the idea of cheating on Danny. But he wasn't going to. He was just going to be sad and mopey and miserable and be his usual bummer of a self, and that's fine. So then he gets drugged, led into the room, and there's 12 women who make him have sex with this young girl, which, he like physically voluntarily gets on the floor, but they surround him and are pushing his hips into her, and it's a whole thing. Uh, so clearly he didn't just do this on his own. Clearly the community is involved. And the other girl's going, "No, don't go over there. Don't worry about it. Just ignore that." Like they know what's going on and they're trying to keep the truth from Danny. So these people are also abusing her trust and lying to her, or at least trying to keep information from her, and are destroying her relationship, right? And trying to hide it. And even with knowledge of that, and the fact that there's murderers who have killed everybody she went there with, she decides, nah, I'm going to hang out with these guys. And I don't know, that's just one step too far for me to buy in that short of a span of time. I know that the film established a bunch of discontent between her and her boyfriend, and that there wasn't anything left for her back in America, and that she saw visions of her dead family in the crowd, so she's supposed to associate the compound with family. But the compound is not actually purely empathetic and loving and supportive like it's set up to be. They are an abusive group of people who are manipulating her and using her boyfriend for the physical needs of their community without his or Danny's consent. And the fact that she then just decides, "Yeah, I'm going to burn him alive and live here," though, it bothers me. It's it's not the end of the world. It doesn't ruin the movie, but it is a problem for which I can find no solution or justification in multiple viewings and in discussing the film with a variety of people. There, people primarily just go, "Oh, you're making a bigger deal out of it than there is," but nobody actually has a solution to the character problem uh, that is presented. The fact that her willingness to just accept everything they've done to her and her friends throughout the film, even though she was the only one throughout the film who was conscious of what was going on and trying to put a stop to it and get them to leave. All of a sudden, at the end, when she finally has her proof that she was right to do that the whole movie, she inverts her entire way of thinking to justify the ending. Um, I don't know. It is a black mark that mars an otherwise nearly perfect movie. Um, and it disappoints me. But, like I said, it's still a great watch, and everything else about it's truly fantastic. I can't wait for Ari Aster's next movie, and I can't believe that Hereditary came out in, what was it? Oh, wait. June of 2018, and Midsommar came out in July of 2019. It was almost exactly a year apart between his first two films, and they're both incredible films. Um, so whatever he does next, horror, folk horror, dark comedy, a romance, a rom com, a drama, whatever, um, I I can't wait to see it. Um, but last I checked, no news on that. So I guess we'll just have to keep waiting. That's it for this week. I haven't decided what movie I'm going to do next. I'm thinking about doing Parasite. So if you haven't seen Parasite, it's currently free on Hulu. And even if I don't do that for the next episode, Parasite's good. You should watch it. If you'd like more of this type of content and you'd like to know when and where it comes out, you can go to YouTube and look up Reference King. And there's a picture of King Henry VIII for the profile picture. And there will be this episode, an episode on Drive, and Annihilation. So you can hit subscribe and the bell to get notifications about when new episodes come out. Or if you prefer, you can go on Facebook and find the Reference King Facebook page and like and follow that for notifications as well. We also have competitions there to see who can name the movies that are featured in the profile pictures that I change once a week. And for now, those are the only places you can get more. Well, you can also go to codytierson.com, which has versions of these episodes. If you scroll down the page about 3/4 of the way, it just says Reference King Podcast, and you'll find all the episodes there as well, if you prefer to navigate it that way. Thank you all again for joining me, and I'll see you in the next episode.